Good morning. It's just a few seconds, in fact, before the 9 o'clock hour, and our focus is squarely on this storm. Hurricane Melissa continues inching closer to Jamaica as a very powerful Category 5 hurricane. Here's a look at the storm's path and just how close it is to making landfall, which is expected to happen in about an hour or so. But the island has been feeling the harsh conditions of those outer bands. Wind gusts of 175 miles per hour. Let me correct that. Sustained winds of 175 miles per hour. So when you factor in the wind gusts, especially at the higher elevations, you can see wind gusts in excess of 200 up to 250 mile per hour wind gusts. Let's talk about storm surge, 14-foot storm surge. While Kingston is far to the east of this system, it could see significant storm surge of up to 14 feet because east of the eye of the storm is where you see the worst of the storm surge. And not to mention the up to 40 inches of rainfall we could see. It's expected to bring catastrophic flooding and heavy rain across all of Jamaica. And certain parts obviously will be hit harder than others as it makes this historic landfall. This is Kingston Bay, and you see the chop beginning to intensify there as the storm gets closer. Just to give you a perspective, I mean, the storm is big, but Kingston is about 100 miles to the east of where the eye of the storm is, where it's expected to make landfall, and you can see the conditions they're dealing with right now. The hurricane force winds are only extending about 25 miles out of the eye, so that's why you don't see the intense windfall. But what you do see is another shot here in Kingston, the flash flooding concerns. They've had rain for several days, and there has been flooding leading up to this hurricane. So now the significant amount of water being brought by the storm surge and by the rainfall, the up to 40 inches of rain, going to cause a lot of problems for people all across this Caribbean island. And once it makes its way through Jamaica, as we give you another look across Kingston this morning, Cuba could be in the crosshairs, parts of Cuba, parts of the Bahamas, western parts of Haiti, Turks and Caicos Islands. We have team coverage for you this morning, and we want to begin with First Alert meteorologist, our hurricane specialist, John Morales, who's been with us all morning long. John, we love to see you, but we know when we see you, that means something bad's happening in the Caribbean right now, and that's right now Hurricane Melissa ready to make landfall.
It is. You know, the eye wall is only about 17 miles from the coast. So, you know, eye wall impacts are going to be happening or starting really within the next hour and a half or so. I would anticipate a landfall, which is defined as when the center of the eye reaches the coast, probably to happen past 10:30, maybe closer to 11 a.m. this morning. That's, of course, less than 2 hours from now. But again, 17 miles to the eye wall, 25 miles to the center of the hurricane for it to make it to the closest point that I can measure it from the coast at this moment, which is in St. Elizabeth Parish. So I'm going to be mentioning some local parishes and cities in Jamaica. We have a very large and vibrant Jamaican American community here in South Florida. I know you're all tuned in and, well, in this case, streaming it, right, on different digital platforms to see what's going on with the hurricane, and we're going to make sure to inform you with a great level of detail of what can be expected down there. Now, Chris, you mentioned, you know, the rainfall. The rainfall has been ongoing for quite some time. It's not just now that it started. We've seen rain for days already in Jamaica, much like the Dominican Republic saw rain for days starting last week on Tuesday from Melissa's impacts. And here we are a week later, it's still raining in Haiti and the Dominican Republic from the impacts of the system. So in the case of Jamaica, maybe it didn't start last Tuesday, but once it got going, it's just rained continuously with occasionally heavy precipitation leading to the type of floods that are already ongoing. And by the way, that image you saw there live in that area, that was not quite as flooded a couple of hours ago when we showed that image on the air. So the flooding, the flash flooding, is getting worse in Jamaica as we go into the morning. Now, just to set you with the latest information from the National Hurricane Center in terms of where the hurricane is at and what its winds are, well, there you go. They've issued a special advisory at 9 a.m. Winds are up to 180 miles per hour. This is brand new information. I am digesting this along with you at this hour. Winds had been sustained 175 miles per hour since last night. Now they have increased to 180. I suspect the barometric pressure could very well be under 900 millibars, which would be just absolutely astounding. This is the strongest hurricane ever recorded so late in a hurricane season, and we're living through this right now, sadly, with the tragic impacts that we're expecting in Jamaica. Now, this is a big change from last night, right? So the hurricane was kind of stalled, if anything, kind of like moving west and then starting to make a turn towards the northwest. That turn is now complete. After kind of like sitting here in this area last night for hours, it made that definitive move towards the north-northeast, now at 7 miles per hour. But I want you to realize this number, 7 miles per hour, the movement across the ocean of the hurricane, that's averaged over a course of 12 hours. That's how the National Hurricane Center reports it out. And I would suspect that, if you were to measure the instantaneous movement of the hurricane across the ocean as it approaches Jamaica right now, across the Caribbean Sea, it's probably greater than 7 miles per hour, because if there's any good news here is that, it is accelerating, and hopefully the impacts upon Jamaica are not going to be lasting so many hours. And I have a way to illustrate that for you here. This is going back to yesterday, the forward speed of Hurricane Melissa. Notice how we were in the 2 to 3 mile per hour range, anywhere between 5 p.m. yesterday up to 2 a.m. today. 2-3 miles per hour at best. Since then, 5 miles per hour at 5 a.m., 7 miles per hour at 8 a.m. I bet at 11 they'll show an even greater movement. So the effects of the surrounding environment on the hurricane are definitely being felt. And that's in the form of a dip in the jet stream, which is driving a front towards Florida, a front which is expected to impact our weather here, but at the same time protect Florida from this hurricane, because a cold front will sweep through and carry the system away further towards the northeast. So, given that consideration, that landfall is imminent in the next hour and a half to 2, let's look at the wind field from this system, because this is really important here, right? The east half of Jamaica, including the biggest population centers here near Kingston, will be outside of the hurricane force winds, will be even outside of the damaging 58 mile per hour or greater wind speeds that are going to impact mainly the western 2/3 of Jamaica. So, when we look at places like Manchester Parish, where Mandeville is, hurricane force winds, and they're going to be pretty robust. When you look at St. Elizabeth Parish, where Black River is, these gusts are going to be just extreme in terms of wind speed. And further west, Westmoreland Parish, you too will see the heavy impacts from this as it slides towards the northeast. And yes, folks, obviously a huge Cuban American population here in South Florida. We're not ignoring Cuba here. We're just talking about the imminent catastrophe which is about to start in Jamaica in the next hour or two. But in the case of Cuba, yes, a major hurricane is headed into the eastern portion of Cuba. That is expected to arrive, as you can see, this evening. The damaging winds expected by around mid-evening. The hurricane landfall expected very late in the evening, probably close to midnight, and then crossing Cuba into Wednesday morning. By then, Wednesday morning, again, viewers, we have lots of viewers in the Bahamas for NBC6. In the southeastern Bahamas, tropical storm force winds arriving by Wednesday morning and then continuing throughout the day. Let me show you this. You just saw it there in graphical form. Let me describe it to you in a way that you can understand just how stark the differences are between different cities in Jamaica in regard to the wind speed that you might expect from this hurricane as it approaches. So I'm going to use Mandeville. Population about 45,000 people. Kingston has a population north of 900,000 people. So these are very different size population centers, but Mandeville, certainly at 45,000 plus people, is certainly an important city. Sustained winds in Mandeville can be expected between 130 and 140 miles per hour today, more than likely around midday today. okay? And the gusts could be 160 to 170. But look at Kingston, right? Removed from the core of the hurricane, removed from the eye wall of the hurricane. Kingston's sustained winds would be just at tropical storm force. They would not be hurricane force. You might get a gust to hurricane force in Kingston, but I think Kingston's biggest problem is in the form of rain and flash floods that come from those rains. And yes, a storm surge certainly possible along the coastline in those lower elevations, very close to that coastline. You're going to see a storm surge that's going to inundate with salt water some parts of the city, and could very well do for the airport too. The airport is in a strip, pretty much exposed to the water, and I think there's going to be some serious flooding going on there at the airport. Before I leave this graphic, right, I produced this graphic by studying, what can be expected in different locations in Jamaica, and I didn't in time, I wasn't able to do it in time to include it here on the graphic, but I'll just tell you that I looked at Black River. Black River is the parish seat for St. Elizabeth Parish, okay? It's the parish seat for St. Elizabeth Parish. Population 4,500 people. So replace Mandeville with Black River. Sustained winds expected there 170 to 180 miles per hour, the sustained winds. The gusts are expected to be 200 to 220 miles per hour in Black River, Jamaica, as this hurricane slides through late this morning into the early afternoon. Obviously, a very serious situation with projectiles of all kinds being thrown around. And for those folks that don't have one of these typical, you see this a lot in the Caribbean, you see it in Puerto Rico, you see it in the Dominican Republic, you see it in Jamaica and Cuba as well, homes that are cinder block homes with poured concrete on rebar roofs. That type of structure will be able to stand up to these type of winds, but not everybody has that type of structure. Okay, there's a lot of folks that have the zinc metal roofs with the very modest wood walls, or maybe some cinder block, but the cinder block is not protected or held up by rebar of any kind. Those homes are in danger too. So just giving you an idea of what's in store for this area as we head into the midday and afternoon. Obviously, hurricane warning for Jamaica. I spoke about Cuba. I spoke about the southeastern Bahamas. And FYI, Turks and Caicos, well, you also watch us, and Haiti. This is a tropical storm warning for you, not a hurricane warning, because conditions are not expected to be, as far as wind speeds are concerned, nearly as bad for you as they are elsewhere. So I've gone for about 10 minutes here, and
180 now.
180. What's the pressure?
Pressure. This is Air Force flying into that.
Yeah, this is Adam Berg. He's giving me this
Pressure
information.
is now down to 896.
Oh my Jesus Christ. Okay. All right, I'm going to hold it together here. So 896 millibars is stronger than Hurricane Milton when it made that run last year. Remember my viral moment last year? 50 millibars in 10 hours, right? It got down to 897 millibars. Now it turns out Melissa has broken or gone past Milton's wreck. So there's only one hurricane. There's only one hurricane in October and November in the Atlantic Basin that's ever been stronger. And that is Hurricane Wilma from 20 years ago. And by the way, Wilma was on dates earlier than the present date. Today's the 28th of October. So again, Melissa is the strongest hurricane so late in a hurricane season. So again, this is all history. It's all bad news, especially for Jamaica. And I'll have a lot more to talk about some of what's driving this, what's producing these catastrophic hurricanes, because, by the way, this is the fourth major hurricane so far this year. 3 of the 4 major hurricanes have reached category 4 and 5 status. 3 of the 4 or 4 of the 5? Anyway, a very large number. I think only one season, 2005, is the season that we had an equal number of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes. So again, a lot of history being made in a backloaded hurricane season, which is definitely and sadly about to be very, very tragic for some of the Caribbean islands. All right, so now I've gone on for 13 minutes. So I think it's time to bring on Adam Berg. You heard him there in the background. He's got a lot more to say about this hurricane and its astounding impacts upon that area in the Caribbean.
Yeah, so we're getting updates coming in a little bit more frequently now, which is a lot of times the case when you have a system close to making landfall here. Don't let these winds fool you too. Kingston, again, much farther away from the center, which has 180 mile per hour winds sustained right around that core, with gusts much higher than that. That's the thing about these systems. This is not a particularly large hurricane too, and that's why you do get quite a bit of drop off. I wish we had more wind gauges out there that would definitely tell the story a little more accurately. So look, you can see that this system is getting very close to the coastline. Landfall is official when the center hits the coast, okay? But as that eye wall approaches the coast, we call that the process of making landfall. And that process can be brutal because the strongest winds are in this little section of the eye. We call that the eye wall. And again, this is about as symmetrical an eye you're going to see. And even the convection around this, incredibly symmetrical. You don't see that a lot of times. You see these hurricanes that they take hits from time to time, right? And they wobble and dry air works in and you don't get that uniform look. This is about as uniform as it gets. The more uniform these things are, the more symmetrical, typically the stronger. That's kind of the case here. Let's kind of zoom in and give you guys some measurements here. So right along the coast here, and John was talking about Mandeville here and possible wind gusts near 200, possibly upper 100s. We're talking about 15 miles away from the eye wall from the coast. The center about 25 miles away. And again, that's when it would be officially landfall, if you were just curious about that. So let's talk about what makes Jamaica a little different, right, than an area without mountains, okay, for a million reasons. So, rain with the mudslides and landslides, but let's kind of talk about just winds in general, okay? So you see these arrows, okay, this is wind coming in. Mountains range anywhere from, you know, pretty low on the west coast here up to about 2,000 feet once you get into western and central parts of Jamaica. And then the biggest mountains here, Blue Mountain, for instance, some of these mountains here, the mountains can get up to about 7,000 feet or so. So you get this wind that comes in, right, from the ocean. And this is, we're going to be having winds coming in out of the south for a good chunk of the southern coast of Jamaica. You get these winds that hit the mountains. Well, wind can't go through the mountain, right? So the winds are forced to hit the mountain and then go up and over. The action of these winds hitting the mountains, you get compression. And whenever you compress anything, the particles, the molecules accelerate, right? So you get air that compresses, heats up a bit, accelerates. So you get even higher wind speeds with this kind of a setup than you would normally get, okay? And we're already talking about, you know, wind speeds now. I mean, with the new update that came in at 9 o'clock, and we'll probably have another one shortly, winds are now 180 or so. So when you add 50% to 180, you're well above 250, and that could absolutely happen in some of the higher peaks here from time to time. Now, these are the gusts, okay? Not the 2-minute average that makes it a sustained wind. You get these gusts in between. Some of these gusts could be over the top. Again, this is going to be some of the mountainous terrain. And I want to stress again, John was talking about this. The wind speeds will be strongest right around that core, okay, which will be western parts of Jamaica here. Treasure Beach, I believe, right in through here or so, could be very close to landfall, maybe even just a little west of there. That's where the strongest winds will be here at the surface. Then, of course, you factor in the mountains and you start getting wind speeds like this. So that's kind of the deal, and that's what makes the winds so much stronger. And by the way, we call the front-facing part of these mountains the windward side. So it's that front-facing side that sees the strongest wind gusts here with this kind of a setup. The wind is also completely responsible for storm surge. Rain is a whole other thing. I'll talk about that coming up in a little bit. I want to save some content, right? But the wind absolutely is connected to storm surge. So here's why exactly. So going to kind of pause around 11, and by 11, probably already seeing landfall. Landfall will be coming shortly here. But you get the idea. So you basically, wherever the winds are pushing water towards the shore, like now through midday easily, this is where we're going to see the worst of the storm surge. So with this kind of a setup, storm surge probably actually not that bad on the western side of Jamaica, except for maybe the north coast, right? So this is where it gets tricky. You find the center, and then on the northwestern side of the coast, yes, there could be some storm surge here. On the southern part of the coast, you got to go a little farther to the east to see that wind. It's all about where the wind is coming onshore, right? So east of the center for the south shore, maybe the extreme western tip on the north shore, looking at 9 to 13 feet of ocean water pushing onshore. That's the deal here. Okay, same thing here in Cuba. Probably not a big deal here on this western tip here of the eastern part of Cuba. Again, because of the placement of that center. But eastern parts of Cuba, near and east of that center, possibly looking at 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. So that's the deal with that. Once that system moves away, this is when you don't have that onshore flow anymore. Cuba gets a break, Jamaica gets a break, and then we start worrying about storm surge, several feet of it possibly here as we go through the Bahamas. So that's the deal for me. I'll be back in a minute. John will be back in a minute. We're going to toss it over to Chelsea right now with some more impacts here and some explainers as to what is going on out there. Hey, Chelsea.
That's right, Berg. We are, Adam, I should say, we saw the intensity really starting to fire up with this storm over the weekend. That's when we saw that rapid intensification. It reached that Category 5 status yesterday morning, and it has held firm over the last 24 hours, and it's about to make landfall as that major Category 5 storm. So as we are watching the system, what is rapid intensification? Well, you have to have wind speeds increase 35 miles per hour in a 24-hour window. We also have what's called extreme rapid intensification, and that's when you get those winds increasing 58 miles per hour in a 24-hour window. Melissa even surpassed that. We saw it gain 70 miles per hour in an 18-hour window, and it went from a tropical storm to a Category 4 hurricane in the matter of hours. And that's what we saw, and you can see how it has held its structure, extreme nature, for several days at this point. And so as we're looking at the timeline of that, we saw on Saturday that tropical storm force winds holding through the morning hours. As we approached Saturday evening, that's when we saw it change over at 2 o'clock. The update went from a tropical storm to a hurricane. That's when winds went up to about 75 miles per hour. By the 7 o'clock update, 90 mile per hour winds. As we went into the overnight hours, 115 mile per hour, Cat 3 by the overnight time frame. And then you can see it reached that 140 mile per hour range. That's that Category 4 storm, and it has held and just continued to strengthen hour by hour up into this point. We are even seeing it strengthen even more now as that pressure continues to fall. Now, why did it strengthen so much? We've had the hostile environment in the upper levels of the atmosphere. We talk about those cold fronts that are coming through the United States. Well, that coupled with the subtropical jet, we've been seeing this wind shear on the eastern, or I should say on the eastern side of Florida, all the way down into western Cuba. And that has not allowed this storm to continue to push to the west. But then there's also this big ridge of high pressure that has not allowed this storm to kind of ride that ridge because it wants to stay in the environment that's not hostile. So that's why it stayed pretty stationary for a couple of days, or at least very slow moving. And now we're seeing it slowly but surely kind of get caught up in that jet. So watch what happens as we go through the next couple of days. That is slowly but surely going to get caught in these upper level winds. The cold fronts that are coming through, it's acting like a block, a wall for areas like western Cuba, the northern Bahamas, South Florida, and that's eventually going to pull this system much faster. It's going to make aim for Bermuda and then eventually stay in those open waters of the Atlantic, even missing Nova Scotia, as it kind of gets steered by those upper level winds as well as that ridge in the Atlantic. So it will pick up momentum. It just hasn't done so yet, and unfortunately for Jamaica, that is a bad thing. This is one of the strongest hurricanes on record, or is the strongest hurricane on record to even make landfall in Jamaica, let alone its nature and its movement. You can see there was a landfall that kind of took the same path, but that was back in 1902, or I should say 1912. That was an unnamed storm named Seven. And it took that path where it kind of moved in just around Montego Bay. This was in August. There must have been some upper level wind that pushed it back, made a second landfall in the northern part of Jamaica. But you can see even Gilbert, 1988, moved in onshore around Kingston and crossed from east to west. We have never had a hurricane in Jamaica go from south to north and do the devastation it's about to do. And this particular track in the history of Jamaica's keeping track of all of these storms that have hit the area. And you can see there's only been 5 on record. Now remember, Beryl caused a lot of damage to the southern shores as well, but technically the eye stayed offshore, and that is why it didn't officially make landfall, even though it had some impacts. And so yes, Jamaica has been impacted by storms, but there's only been 5, and today will be 6 to ever make landfall. Now the hurricane hunters are in the storm, but we're continuing to see those updates come in. I'll show you that in just a second. But landfall, we keep talking about the eye center has to cross the coast. So even though the eye wall, that is the strongest, most destructive part of the storm, it's not officially going to count as landfall until we're dead smack in the center. Draw a line right between that circle that you see there. That's the eye, and that is going to be official landfall. So the impacts are obviously felt ahead of that, and it will continue to move onshore, but official landfall will be when that halfway point happens. Now, there will be a false sense of calm once you get in the eye, again, because these winds are rotating so fast. The sunshine, you'll see it, it'll come out, and then you'll have the other side to get through as this moves across the island, and you can see just how large that eye is at this point. So that is the official definition of landfall when it's halfway across the island, or at least halfway onshore. Like I mentioned, the Air Force reconnaissance, they are in it. That is this plane. NOAA is also on the way, so 2 hurricane hunters are getting that data that's in the storm. We're going to keep getting those updates. We'll have more data coming in out every time they take a pass through the storm, which is when they go into the eye wall, in and out of the eye wall. And that's why we got that update that the pressure has fallen and that we're seeing the additional data coming in. Now, some of the lowest, this is what John was talking about, some of the lowest pressures on record, Milton was one of them. We're seeing this at 896 millibars, 896 millibars. So this is now one of the lowest pressures on record. This is going to be one of the most devastating storms, or will be the most devastating storm for Jamaica at this point, and then it's going to continue to move into Cuba. You can see the lowest pressure ever recorded, 2005, was Wilma at 882 millibars. That's the measure of pressure that we're looking at here. So we are going to continue to see some of these impacts, but with that said, again, the eye wall is going to push in some of the storm surge. Berg talked about this too. It's anywhere you see onshore wind. So as this is starting to approach, I would not be surprised if surge is already starting in parts of the island. We are seeing that right front quadrant, that's the strongest part of the storm. Peak just to the east of the eye wall is going to be 9 to 13 feet. So places like Mandeville, that's where we could see some of that highest surge. Again, just to the east of the eye wall. Places like Kingston, you're still going to see that potential for surge, but again, the strongest is going to be a little bit further to the west, and that's because of those onshore winds. Notice how we have these bays on the southern side of Jamaica. It almost acts like a mitt. All of that water is going to get pushed into the west side first, and so western parts of Kingston could see those impacts. And then again, as Adam was showing us, as this moves to the north, places like Montego Bay, we're talking 4 feet on the northern shores as well. So the winds will turn, and we'll keep seeing those turns in the winds across these areas as we're going forward in time. But I do want to send things, let's just put this into perspective for you. One more graphic and then I'll wrap it up. But I do want to put it into perspective for you. When we're talking 9 to 13 feet, think of your home, your standard home, right? That is the first floor. And then you have the infrastructure that can't support this in parts of Jamaica. So entire homes could be washed away when you're talking 9 to 13 feet. I'm only about 5'8", 6 feet with heels on, right? So the water is unimaginable. And you're seeing some of those peak surges coming in at 9 to 13 feet on that eastern eye as the storm approaches the coastal areas of Jamaica. Chris, just to kind of leave that with the viewers here to kind of wrap your head around it.
Chelsea, while we still have you, we're going to take a live look in Jamaica right now, because we've been focusing on the map, and while the eye of the storm is going to hit the western part of Jamaica, 100 miles or so away from the capital city of Kingston, Kingston is to the east, so could they see the brunt of that storm surge, since the eastern part of the storm is where you see that storm surge? Could that be what Kingston has to worry about? This is a live look, in fact, in Kingston Bay right now, where you see it starting to intensify, that chop really starting to kick up.
Well, it's going to be, let me go back a graphic so I can show you kind of, it would be closer to the Treasure Beach area. It would be a little bit closer to, here, come back out so I can point it out on the map for you, just so you get a sense. Yes, Kingston is going to see surge, but again, here's the eye, right? This is where the eye is. It's going to be as you get closer to, like, just right to the east of the eye. That's where you're going to see that 9 to 13 feet. You still could get several feet. We're talking 6 to 8, 10 feet, but the highest surge is going to be the closer you are to that eye. And again, the winds are going to push a little bit more with a westerly flow as it approaches on shore. So we're talking far western parts of the bay are going to see the brunt of the surge before those winds turn. So again, parallel, if you live in these areas, yes, you're still going to have some surge, but again, you're slightly further away, and so the winds are more tropical storm force and less hurricane force. But again, right here in Jamaica, that's where the worst is going to be, closer to the Mandeville area.
Yeah, and then as that storm, of course, moves across, then you have the north coast that's going to feel the storm surge, and the Montego Bays, the Negrills, the Ocho Rios.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Chelsea, thank you. This is a lot to go over right now as we bring you back out live to Kingston Bay, where it sounds like, at least according to this latest track, that Kingston will be spared from the brunt of this storm. But the western part of Jamaica is going to be devastated. There are catastrophic conditions expected as a result of this storm. Preparations have been happening across South Florida as well, because we know the connection that we have to Jamaica. There are so many Jamaicans and Jamaican Americans living in South Florida who still have friends and family and close ties to the island. So I know a large portion of South Florida is watching this very closely. Another shot in Kingston right now, and while Kingston may not see the 180-mile-an-hour sustained winds and the huge wind gusts of in excess of 200 miles per hour, they are seeing flash flooding. And in fact, this continues to get worse. This is a bridge where you don't see the bridge anymore. It's inundated. It's covered by the water from the flash flooding. And the problem is Kingston has been seeing rain for days now, and it's saturated the ground. And we've seen flooding leading up to Melissa. Now Melissa is coming in, this hurricane, bringing with it up to 40 inches of rainfall. And again, another live look in Kingston. Different areas see different vantage points. You still see a few cars out there right now. But again, Kingston is probably going to avoid the brunt of this storm. We want to bring in our hurricane expert, John Morales. And I know, John, the situation has changed. The wind speed's now up to 180 miles an hour, sustained winds. The pressure dropping as well. We're seeing one of the strongest hurricanes ever.
Indeed, one of the strongest hurricanes ever. You've hit the nail on the head here. We know that as far as October and November hurricanes, in other words, the latter third of the hurricane season, this is now the second strongest hurricane ever observed in the Atlantic. It's also the strongest hurricane so late in a hurricane season. All right, let me just bring folks up to date here. This sequence that you see here ends right within the last couple of minutes, right? So you can see how the eye of the hurricane is making a beeline for the Jamaican coast. Looks like St. Elizabeth Parish is likely where it's going to make landfall. This would be west of Manchester Parish and east of Westmoreland Parish. Westmoreland is over here. St. Elizabeth is here. Manchester Parish is over here. That's where Mandeville is. Mandeville has a population of around 45,000 people, much different than Jamaica's Kingston capital, where you have north of 900,000 residents, right? And that's just Kingston proper. That greater metro area has north of a million people that live just there. Now, the distance of the eye wall to the coast now is down to 15 miles. 15 miles, right? And the distance of the center of the eye of the hurricane to the coast is now down to 20 miles. Now, this means that hurricane force winds have officially reached the coastline, because hurricane force winds on the northeastern quadrant of this hurricane extend out 25 miles. So we're within the radius of maximum winds already. Those winds to hurricane force are already impacting St. Elizabeth Parish near the coast of that location. Now, at 9 a.m., we got an update from the National Hurricane Center with new information in terms of the maximum sustained winds up to 180 miles per hour and the barometric pressure. I mean, look at that, right? 896 millibars. I was having a discussion with one of the producers offline here just a little while ago, trying to put this barometric pressure in context for you. So just realize that the standard pressure on the surface of the Earth, which this pressure comes from the column of air molecules that sits above us, right, is 1,013 millibars. 1,013 millibars is the normal pressure. Now, by the time you get to 970 millibars of the weight of the air above you, you're already in hurricane territory. You can have a hurricane with 970 millibars of pressure, but this isn't 970. This is 896. The record-setting hurricane in the Atlantic Basin in terms of pressure, in terms, therefore, of strength, is Hurricane Wilma 20 years ago at 882. I don't think we have time to make a run at 882, because once it hits land, it's going to lose strength, and this number will start to climb. But, you know, it's already the second strongest in the latter half of the season, and it's just an impressive cyclone that looks more like a Western Pacific super typhoon, where we've seen the strongest cyclones on Earth, right? That's what this looks like. Moving north-northeast at 7 miles per hour, that number has been increasing. That's how I know that within the next hour-ish, maybe an hour and a half, we're going to get the official landfall of this hurricane. Here's what I was talking about. Wilma, 882. Now Melissa, ranked second in terms of lowest pressures, October and November, displacing Milton from last year at 897. What's also interesting about this list is our records date back to 1851, right? And yet every single record-setting or top 5 ranked strongest hurricane in October and November are all in the last 20 years, right? Something has shifted.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you in great level of detail what that is, because you hear me talking about it all the time.
John.
Yes, sir.
Question for you, just about the location of this storm and the building structures. Kingston, obviously the most developed section as far as structurally sound buildings with the concrete, the rebar, the cinder blocks. When you get out to the more rural parishes, the St. Elizabeth, the Mandeville, where we're going to see the most intense hurricane force winds, are the structures up to that standard? It is more rural, it is more remote. Are we going to see, you know, some of these structures just aren't going to be able to sustain these types of winds?
No, of course, absolutely not. And that's typical of all these Caribbean islands. You even find it in Puerto Rico, which is a U.S. territory, but nevertheless, you know, there are middle and upper class communities, and then there's the frontline communities, the communities that don't have those resources to be able to build to those standards. Again, you know, cinder blocks, much like we have here in South Florida, with the added benefit of something that you don't see in Florida, of poured concrete on rebar roof, which really makes these homes sturdy. Again, mostly middle class, upper class neighborhoods in Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, even Cuba, right? I mean, these are constructions dating back to prior to the revolution. So I would definitely expect, Chris, to answer your question, some complete destruction of some of those more weak edifications across parts of Jamaica as these winds come through. Because as I said at the top of the 9 o'clock hour, we're talking of winds that can be sustained. And I did this calculation for Black River. Black River, let's see, it is the county, not the county, the parish seat for St. Elizabeth Parish. It's a small community, 4,500 people approximately, but it is the parish seat. Black River is expecting sustained winds 170 to 180, gusts 200 to 220 miles per hour. And I expect those gusts on the hilltops, on the ones that are on the windward side of some of the hills and mountains in parts of western Jamaica, to have wind gusts probably to 250 plus miles per hour, because on the hilltops, the gust factor, the acceleration of the wind gust is even greater, because the air, like Adam Berg explained earlier, as it rides up the mountain, you're getting that air column compressed, and because of the physical properties of when you compress air that's in motion, that leads to further acceleration and even stronger wind speeds in that area. So that's what I would expect, Chris, in those locations. Let me just pivot so I can get out of this graphic. I was stating what is going on in terms of seeing all these most powerful hurricanes happen not in the 19th century, not for much of the 20th century. They're happening mostly in the 21st century. And there is peer-reviewed research that indicates that we're getting a greater proportion of tropical cyclones reaching Category 4 and 5 intensity across the planet. And that has to do everything with sea surface temperatures and the ocean heat content that sits below the sea surface. So, even if you have a hurricane that sat down here for a good day or two or three, right, where you would think that all that churning of the ocean would upwell colder water temperatures, leading to the weakening of the storm because it doesn't have that fuel of the warm sea surface temperatures. Well, no, not in this case, because not only are the sea surface temperatures ranked in this area amongst the top 3 hottest we've seen on record, right? And that, by the way, that condition made 600 to 700 times more likely by human-caused climate change. But the depth of the warm water is enough to, despite the churning of the surface of the ocean, to continue to fuel the hurricane, even to the stage where it is intensifying, even as it makes its approach to that area in Jamaica. All right, so within the next 15-20 minutes, according to this computer forecast model, and now we're looking at future tracking, we're looking forward here, the landfall of Melissa this morning with destructive impacts that last throughout much of this day. This would happen maybe a little bit past 10. I mean, we're only 17, 18 minutes from 10 o'clock at this hour, and I told you a little while ago that the center of the hurricane was still 20 miles offshore. But I'm just showing you the general trend of what you can expect today, how long it's going to last. Here's Tuesday afternoon, today in the afternoon, 2:15, 2:30, the eye of the hurricane starting to make its way out of Jamaica, but with the bands still impacting that region. And then you see southern Cuba. This is Cuba here. There's the Guantanamo Bay is off to the east. Santiago de Cuba, a very large city located on the southeastern side of Cuba. They would start to feel those very strong impacts as we head into the mid-afternoon and evening. There's the landfall for Cuba late this evening, call it 11 o'clock at night, 12 midnight or so. Look at the strength of this, already impacting almost the entire eastern side of Cuba with the landfall, which will probably not be a Cat 5, right? Because the interaction with Jamaica is going to weaken this hurricane. And while it could re-strengthen over those waters between Jamaica and Cuba, it's more than likely not to be able to bounce back to a Category 5 by that time, but it would still be a major hurricane, which is a big deal. And here's Wednesday morning, close to 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, the hurricane with a broader eye starting to exit Cuba at that hour. And then if you're watching us in the Bahamas, your impacts are going to start mostly in the morning, but here is Wednesday afternoon at the time of landfall in some of these islands in the southeastern Bahamas, and then eventually heading out into the Atlantic. Florida, thankfully, is protected by a front coming in from the northwest. So, you know, that's what's going on with this hurricane right now. I'm watching for Adam Berg to come in here at any moment, and he's going to talk about more about some of these impacts, and there he is. But briefly, I'll tell you that the only good news I can leave you with is that we're starting to see the movement of the hurricane on approach to Jamaica accelerate. So it spent much of the night, it spent almost all night, 2 to 3 miles per hour as it moved across the ocean. Then by 5 a.m. at 5 miles per hour, at 8 a.m. 7 miles per hour. I would expect a higher number at 11 a.m. because I think it's starting to accelerate towards the north and northeast. Adam Berg is here. He's going to talk about more of what's going on with this hurricane.
All right, and with some of that developing information here, let's go ahead and get you set up with basically what we know as of right now here. So pressure down to 896. John was hitting this hard. That makes it the 5th lowest pressure on record. Okay, and typically pressure is related to wind speed. Sometimes they don't always line up exactly, but typically the lower the pressure, the stronger the hurricane. Okay, so when you have one of the lowest pressures on record, you get the idea. Okay, Wilma, by the way, the lowest, 882 back in 2005. All right, so that's the pressure update that we got as of 9 a.m., breaking some new ground, unfortunately. So what's next here? So for Jamaica, landfall occurring shortly. In fact, that eye wall right in through here getting very close to the coast here. So this is when we call it being in the process of making landfall. Officially, landfall occurs when that center is over land. So this is all going to be happening shortly. So then for Cuba, landfall, very possible overnight tonight. And then the Bahamas could get some direct impacts here midday into Wednesday here. So those are the next 3 potential landfalls that are occurring. So let's kind of zoom in on this right now. And this is always moving here. So we're gonna zoom in even more. The little ruler that I drew there may even be a little off, and it is already. So probably less than 12 miles. There's your eye wall, the innermost part of the eye wall. So we're probably talking maybe even now less than 10 miles, that eye wall from the coastline. Moving northeast at 7, maybe even a little faster now. This means that eye wall is going to completely be on land in less than an hour, much less than an hour, actually. So then when you look at the center, now we're probably talking, honestly, you know, less than 20 miles from that center. Moving northeast, probably faster than 7 now. So we're talking, yeah, landfall could easily come during that official landfall, that 10 o'clock hour, maybe as late as 11 o'clock, somewhere in that time frame, just based on current speed and where it's going. So we're going to talk about the wind gust potential, and I'm going to talk about some of the rain that's in the forecast as well. So with this system now, 180 miles per hour sustained winds right around that center, with it offshore here coming in this direction. We get these screaming south winds. How do these winds interact with the mountain? You may have heard from some of the reports, either online, on the news, or from the Hurricane Center directly. They've been talking about 30, 40, 50% stronger winds here in the mountains versus, you know, other locations. And here's why. We have mountains that range from about 2,000 to 7,000 feet here in Jamaica. When these winds hit the mountains, the winds can't go through the mountains, right? When they hit the mountains, they're forced to go up and over. As those winds hit the mountains, you get compression. And when the air compresses, it accelerates. So you're adding on to that speed with that compression. That acceleration translates into even higher wind speeds, okay? So how much higher? 30 to 50% higher. So in some cases, even a little bit more. When you have wind speeds that are already sustained around 180 miles per hour, now we're talking wind speeds could reach roughly 250 to 270 in some very isolated spots where the mountains are highest here. So that is the unfortunate conclusion that we come to with kind of the wind and mountain interaction. And these are called the windward. This is the windward side. So if you're hearing that phrase, that's what that means. This is the front-facing part of the mountains here, the windward side, that will see the strongest winds. That's in a nutshell how that works. Now you see Kingston just sitting here, right? Kingston's winds are going to be much, much lower. They're so much farther away from where that center is going to be making landfall. Center making landfall somewhere in here near Treasure Beach, just a little bit to the north and west of Treasure Beach. Kingston's winds will be much, much lower, but a whole other beast for them in the form of storm surge. So that'll be the issue in many areas. Let's talk about the rainfall part. You know, more people die and are impacted by heavy rain than storm surge. So when you see, you know, some of the numbers coming in, 30 to 40 inches of rain, and this is how the rain situation works here. You get 30 to 40 inches of rainfall. You know, even without the water pooling, you know, we're probably talking, you know, up in here or so, right? The thing is, though, where does the water go? It always finds the low-lying areas. This is why maybe in your neighborhood, if you've ever heard, oh, you know, they said that we had 2-3 inches of rain. Why is the water up to here? That's what happens. The water finds the low-lying areas, it pools, makes it much higher. So when you're talking 30 to 40 inches of rainfall, and then the water finding those low-lying areas, you're going to have, you know, flooding that is just, you know, 1 story high, if not higher in some spots. So brutal storm surge, wind damage, and flooding rains here. We're talking about 20 inches or more inches of rain here across parts of Cuba as well. Now, just real quick, we've already seen a lot of rain. This map I'm showing you with the colors, these are the additional rainfall amounts. And this pink, by the way, I don't have a legend here, but this pink, this is over a foot more rainfall on top of the rain that we've already seen, getting your totals here to about 20 to 25 inches or so. And then you see portions of Haiti as well. We could be looking at 20 inches before all is said and done. So it's going to be Jamaica basically now, and then it's going to be Cuba as we go overnight tonight as far as landfall, and then it's going to be between now and midday Wednesday when we see direct impacts here across the Bahamas with heavy rain, storm surge, and wind and the like. Chris, you got a question for me?
Yeah, and you just touched on one of the last words you just said, the wind. Over the weekend, we had wind gusts of, 30 miles an hour, and we were talking about how windy it was and how intense it was. And I just can't get out of my head. You're saying 250 to 265 mile per hour wind gusts. And, you know, structures here in South Florida aren't built to withstand that type of wind. This could be a nightmare situation for folks in Jamaica, particularly that western part, seeing not only the sustained winds of 180 miles an hour, which is crazy to begin with, but to get up into the 250 to 260 mile per hour range, that's unheard of.
Right. I mean, you have sustained winds right around that center, meaning just constant 180 miles per hour, right? And just naturally, even without the mountains, you're going to get gusts over 200. John was talking about, you know, some of that when he was up here a moment ago. And then you add in the mountains and some of the impacts you get there with how the wind interacts with, you know, kind of smashing into the windward facing mountains there. It gives you another accelerating factor. So that's the problem with, you know, and look, we're talking about a hurricane with the 5th lowest pressure on record, right? So you've got a top end hurricane that unfortunately is moving very slowly, although thankfully picking up some forward speed. Look, it's hard to find positives right now, but a couple of them are, yes, the forward speed is picking up a little bit, Chris. So the wind and rain, you know, doesn't hang over one spot for as long versus, you know, there were many moments where that system was either stationary or only moving at like 1-2 miles per hour. So at least the forward speed is picking up a little bit so it can, you know, get a little bit of movement going.
Yeah, tough to find any silver linings here, but if there is any, that's got to be one that it pushes through and moves quicker, so it doesn't just sit there dumping all of that rain, all of that water.
And it's not the entire island of Jamaica either, right? So we talk about Kingston on the other side. We're talking about, you know, winds that'll be living a little bit more in the tropical storm force, you know, kind of zone, right? So terrible impacts. The storm surge is always worst very near the coast. I know there's some elevation in Jamaica here. So as you get farther away from the coast and you have a little elevation, storm surge drops off very quickly. You know, even with Ian, when it made landfall on the west coast of Florida, you know, the decimation that hurricane brought here was very close to the coast, right? So, once you got a half mile inland, 3/4 of a mile inland, even with Ian, which was over the top as well, Category 5 hurricane, with just the right angle of attack there to deliver a huge storm surge. Once you go 3/4 of a mile inland, there's not much storm surge, right? So storm surge limited to the southern coast, the northwest coast as well. We'll see some of that, Montego Bay. See a little bit of storm surge as well, but the worst of the storm surge will be confined to areas close to the coast. Heavy rain for many parts of the island. That's probably one of my biggest concerns, because that's going to be for a huge part of the island. The catastrophic winds, very near that center. Storm surge very close to the coast. The rain, a lot of times, can be the biggest deal, and it really doesn't matter how strong the hurricane is, right?
Yeah, we've been seeing the videos of them working feverishly to try to clear out those gullies there that funnels and channels that water back out to the ocean. They've been working to try to get that done. I'll let you go regroup, Adam, and I know you're back there with John and with Chelsea getting the latest information for us, because this storm, we're covering it so closely because it is impacting our friends and our family in Jamaica. There are so many people across South Florida with ties to the country, Jamaicans and Jamaican Americans. So preparations have been happening across South Florida, gathering donations, trying to collect what they can so that they can send those down to Jamaica. We want to go to NBC6's Brianna Nesperal here this morning with the latest on the efforts to collect these donations to send down to Jamaica and the other affected islands, and how you can help.
We're inside Miramar Police Headquarters, one of several locations accepting donations to be sent over to our friends over in Jamaica. Take a look at some of the boxes here in the lobby already. They are already getting filled up. This one, we have bedding, we have some canned foods, non-perishable items, some of these boxes. And here behind me, we have cots, beds ready to be shipped over, as well as bedding there on the side. Anything helps to be sent over to the island nation. Meanwhile, people on the island say they're taking shelter and preparing for the worst. In Jamaica, boats are being dragged to higher ground, windows are boarded up, and residents are bracing for heavy rainfall. As we've heard, the Category 5 hurricane is expected to cause flooding, landslides, and widespread devastation. We spoke to a man who lives in Montego Bay on the north side of the island nation. He says he's spent the past few days bracing for Melissa's impact, stocking up on groceries, putting sandbags in place, and filling up his car with gas. He says Montego Bay, which is normally bustling with tourism, now feels like a ghost town.
Everywhere is pretty much shut down. It's almost like everybody is just sitting in place. People are scared. It's scary. It's a real factor. This is devastation that we've never seen before.
Meanwhile, relief efforts are underway in South Florida. Take a look at your screen for a look at some of the different drop-off locations. Items needed include new blankets and sheets, baby diapers and wipes, canned food, non-perishables, flashlights, batteries, and first aid kits. And in some of these spots, you can also drop off donations around the clock, 24 hours, so you can come at your convenience to help out, again, our neighbors and friends in Jamaica. For a list of those locations, you can also head to our website, NBC6.com, or check it out on the NBC6 News app. In Miramar, I'm Brianna Nesperal, NBC6 News.
Yeah, now is the time to donate. It's never too late. They really want to get as many supplies as they can. Just imagine out in those rural areas where this hurricane is suspected to hit, in St. Elizabeth and Mandeville and those parishes out there. Some of the limited structures, the wooden structures, they're going to be decimated by this storm. When you have sustained winds of 180 miles per hour, that means it's sustained. That's the average over 2 minutes. So that doesn't include but it doesn't mention the wind gusts that could exceed 200 plus miles per hour, which factors into getting that 180 mile per hour average over a 2-minute span. This is Kingston Bay right now. Kingston is 100 miles or so to the east of where the eye of this storm is. Hurricane force winds are only extending out about 25 miles, which is a relatively good news, at least for those people in Kingston. But you can see it's still miserable conditions there right now. They're expecting to see tropical storm force winds. They're having potential for storm surge into Kingston Bay. This is another shot in Kingston. This is another big concern. There has been so much rain over the past few days leading up to this storm that the ground is already saturated. We've seen flooding ahead of Hurricane Melissa, and now we're continuing to see this flash flooding. It's intensified here. We've been looking at this shot of a bridge all morning long, and it gets worse every time we see it. Another live look as we pan across Kingston this morning, and we're getting mixed views. You can see some rainfall in some of the shots, some wind in some of the other shots. We're not really getting shots from the western part of the island, which is where we're expecting to see the most intense wind, the heaviest impact as far as wind damage is concerned. To the east of the storm, that's where we're expecting to see the brunt of the storm surge, up to 13 feet of water. Picture that in your mind. Stand up. How tall are you? 5.5 feet, maybe 6 feet tall, double that. That's a single-story home underwater with this storm surge pulling into shore and just crashing ashore. There's the flash flooding, there's the wind, there's the heavy rain, there's the storm surge. Jamaica is about to get hit by not only the most powerful storm to ever hit the island, but as we bring in meteorologist Chelsea Ambrose, Chelsea, this is also one of the most powerful hurricanes ever recorded, and it's about to make landfall in Jamaica as a Category 5 storm with sustained winds of 180 miles per hour. This is mind-boggling, and this is terrifying.
Devastating. It's devastating what is about to happen, especially to that western part of the island. Now, some of the key messages coming in and to be noted is that the winds could cause total structure failure. It could isolate some communities because of roadways potentially getting washed out from mudslides, debris flows, the rainfall, the surge. Long-lasting power outages could cut off communication to loved ones. Again, if power lines go down, there are no towers to call. Use your phones. So long-lasting power outages are expected. And then, of course, the flooding, the mudslides, and the surge, all that come with a hurricane, let alone a Category 5 storm that has not weakened since it's strengthened. We have not seen an eye wall replacement. We haven't seen anything to impact this storm in any way that has lessened it or weakened it as it continues to work closer and closer to the coastline. So it will make landfall as a Category 5 storm, still be a powerful potential Category 4 storm upon landfall in Cuba, and then move through the island and work towards the Bahamas as a Category 2 hurricane as we go into Wednesday afternoon. So Cuba, overnight tonight, it could make landfall as a Cat 4, and then into the Bahamas, moving through the islands as a Category 3 storm. I'm showing you this because the surge that is going to come with this on the northern part of the island of Jamaica, even after it passes 2 to 4 feet, areas highlighted in red. Just to the east of the eye wall, that's where we could see that 9 to 13 foot surge. So wherever that eye comes in, just to the east of it, that's going to be the most intense. We've talked about Jamaica throughout the hour, but Cuba, 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. Again, same thing, where you look at that eye wall just to the east of the eye wall, that's where the strongest and highest surge is going to be. Those strongest winds will push that ocean water and inundate the coastal areas. Now, tropical storm force winds extend out about 30 miles, or excuse me, I should say hurricane force winds extend out about 30 miles. Tropical storm force winds extend out 195 miles. So that is a lot further away that you could even still see some of that surge on the southern coast of eastern Cuba. Then as you head into the Bahamas, we're talking 4 to 6 foot surge. Some of these islands are going to see that water inundation as that continues over the next 24 hours to move across the island. And again, Chris was mentioning it, to put it into perspective, the average person 5 to 6 feet, right? And then the bottom of your home, the ceiling of your house is about 9 to 12 feet. So we're talking 9 to 13 foot surge in some spots, 11 foot surge in Cuba. Some of the structures can't even handle any type of flooding, can't handle the winds. And so we could see, again, some of these structures wiped away from the surge, and then you factor in the wind as this moves across the island. So it is going to be devastating from just that water inundation. And then you factor in the rain that Adam was showing us. We're talking 20, 30 inches of rain. So
Chelsea, I wanted to jump in real quickly, because obviously the time to evacuate is over.
Oh, yeah.
The storm's here. If you're in one of these structures, if you have family or friends in the western part, in Mandeville, in St. Elizabeth, in one of these parishes, and you can still reach out to them, what's some advice you would give them? What do you do if you're in one of these potentially compromised structures? Is it best to just find an interior room? Just what kind of safe place can you find in these structures when you're seeing winds of sustained winds of 180 miles per hour and gusts over 200 miles per hour?
Well, for the wind, you'll want to get into an interior home, but some of these structures aren't going to be to withstand that. So if you can leave, definitely do so. This is going to be devastating. And then you hide from the water, you run from the water, hide from the wind is what you say, right? So the higher you get in a home is going to be helpful when you have flooding. But when you have winds this strong, it's not going to do you much good to get higher because the roof is going to be the first thing to go. So unfortunately, the only way to stay safe at this point is to get away from that center, get further away. Tropical storm force winds impacting Kingston are going to be a little bit less impactful than the hurricane force winds as this moves on shore closer to the eye. So again, if you're in eastern Cuba, go west. Try and get out of some of those structures that aren't as strong as others. In Jamaica, it's kind of just hunker down and hope for the best at this point because it's moving on shore within the next few minutes, if not less than an hour. So the worst is already here in parts of Jamaica, Chris.
Devastating to think about, and I'm reading reports and just speculation that this could change the landscape of Jamaica, particularly that western part. Just make it unrecognizable. And this isn't the type of storm that you recover from quickly. This is the type of storm that can do such severe damage that it takes decades to rebuild structures and recover from.
That is exactly the wording from the National Hurricane Center. Again, isolating communities, cutting off communication, structural failure. There will be areas that do not look the same after this. And as this Category 5 storm moves across the entire island, this is the first time in Jamaica's history that we've seen a storm not only this size, but this path across the island. So places that might not have been hit by a hurricane before, even though Jamaica has been hit by hurricanes before, they're going to take the brunt of this storm. And it was able to get so strong because there were no upper level winds to weaken it. There was no other factors that allowed this storm to lose its structure. There is a lot of wind shear into western Cuba and those higher level of the atmosphere layers. So that is why that storm never continued to track west. It kind of slowly but surely meandered its way just south of Jamaica. We have a ridge of high pressure that's localized to or centralized to the east. And so that ridge of high pressure, now the upper level jet, is about to take this storm, funnel it in, and eventually pull it much faster. But until the jet catches it, it's still going to be that slow moving. We are seeing it pick up forward speed, which is good, but it's not going to really start to jet out and move that quick 20-mile-per-hour pace until after it gets past the Bahamas. But again, it is going to pick up speed as it continues to track to the north. So that is the good news for places like the Bahamas. Bad news for Jamaica because that Category 5 strength hurricane is likely to stay a Category 5 slow moving throughout the entire day today. And then you can see that continues to move into the open waters, taking aim at Bermuda as a Category 1 storm and then staying off the coast of Nova Scotia and Canada as this continues to track to the north. Now, it rapidly intensified as we went Saturday into Sunday. Rapid intensification has a definition, and it's defined as intensifying 35 miles per hour in 24 hours. Extreme rapid intensification is when you get 58-mile-per-hour winds increasing in 24 hours. Melissa gained 70 miles per hour in an 18-hour window. So a very short amount of time, it extremely exploded. And you can see watching the structure, the eye never wavered. It has been a powerful storm from the time it went from a tropical storm to a Category 4 hurricane. We saw that Cat 5 reached yesterday, and it has held a Category 5 storm since then. Over 24 hours at this point, as it's now taking aim at Jamaica. And again, rapid intensification, just to put that into perspective, is that 35-mile-per-hour winds. It went from 70 miles per hour to 140 miles per hour just within a couple of hours. So that extreme increase is what led to this storm just being as powerful as it is. The sea surface temperatures are warm, and John Morales was talking about that. We have no wind shear whatsoever. There is so much moisture available in this part of the Caribbean that we've seen the thunderstorms blossom. And places like the Dominican Republic and Haiti, well away from the center of this storm, have been flooded and inundated with rainfall because that's how far out away from the center the rainfall is expanding. So this is a powerful storm of Melissa. Now, again, like I said, Jamaica has been hit by hurricanes before. There have been 5 that have made landfall in Jamaica, 3 of them unnamed at this point, and they're well before we started naming storms. You can see 4, 7, 2 unnamed storms from 1903, 1912, 1944, and then you have Gilbert and Charlie, and a lot of our family members in Jamaica remember Gilbert. It made landfall just to the west of Kingston and tracked across the island. Now, unnamed 7 in 1912 did make landfall closer to Montego Bay. You can see how it crossed the northern part of the island. There was something in the upper level winds that pushed this storm right back, so there was a double landfall in the northern part of the island, but we have not seen a landfall come in from the south and cross Jamaica like we're seeing now with Melissa. And this is one of the most strongest storms to not only hit Jamaica but move into the Caribbean at this time of the year, so it is going to be very impactful. And also Gilbert, notice 1988, that's on the list for one of the second lowest pressure on record. Now, Gilbert was a Category 4 storm at landfall, did reach Cat 5 status. You can see that purple line there, that's Gilbert. But again, Melissa is going to be that strongest storm to ever hit Jamaica and track from south to north across the island, devastating its path as it moves. Now, again, landfall is when the center moves onshore, fully halfway crossing that threshold, and you can draw a line right across the center. That's when you'll see landfall, but the outer eye wall is already starting to move onshore, and you can see it there. This is going to continue to move onshore. The most destructive part of the storm is that eye wall right there. You'll have a false sense of calm when you get into the eye because, again, these winds are so strong around the center. You'll see the sunshine. We can see the ocean. That is the ocean right there. But as this continues to move onshore, the devastating impacts are going to be felt first. If you are in the eye, you'll have a break and you're going to think, we're done. You're not done. You have the second half to get through. The southern side of that storm will also have to cross. And so again, this storm is slowly approaching landfall, and we're going to be seeing the impacts of this storm throughout the day today, and then it's going to take aim at Cuba. The good news for Cuba, in the sense that as this storm moves into Jamaica, it starts to interact and there'll be a little bit of friction. That's why it goes from a Cat 5 to a Cat 4, but still, Cat 4 is a major hurricane to take aim at Cuba as this continues to move to that northeast track across Jamaica. So,
Chelsea, while we have this up, I'm just looking at this storm. If someone said draw a picture of a hurricane and you wanted to make it look just ideal like a hurricane,
perfect.
I mean, look at the defined eye, the symmetrical eye, just that buzzsaw appearance. If you were to draw a picture of what the worst case scenario type hurricane would look like, I'm imagining this is what it would look like.
This is it. And again, like I mentioned, there was no wind shear for this storm. It never went an eye wall replacement. There was nothing in the upper levels to weaken this at all. It exploded when it went from that tropical storm to a Cat 4. Went from a Cat 4 to Cat 5 yesterday. Within 18 hours, a tropical storm to a Cat 4. And it has held its structure since then. Since it became a Cat 5 at 5 a.m. yesterday, it has not weakened. It has only continued to strengthen. And we got that update at 9 a.m. that it is even stronger upon landfall. And sometimes we see it weaken right as the outer bands and right as that eye wall starts to interact. That's not the case with this storm. We saw the reconnaissance go in and measure that increase in wind speed and measure the drop in pressure upon landfall. And so devastating impacts are being felt now as that eye wall is moving onshore. You can see it there. That is where the strongest wind is. And again, you'll get a false sense of hope when the eye is on because we have that stadium effect, if you will, when you can see the eye wall and you're in it and the winds are calm and you see the sunshine. But you have the other side to get through because that's only halfway. You're only halfway done with this storm, Chris, as it continues to get closer to Jamaica.
Chelsea, this is tough. It's really, we can't even fathom what the parts of Jamaica are going to look like after this storm tears through with 180-mile-an-hour sustained winds. I mean, I'm going back, I remember Hurricane Andrew going through that back in 1992, and I believe the sustained winds for that storm were about 165 miles per hour. And we saw the devastation to Kendall, to Homestead, to the southern part of Miami-Dade County after that storm ripped through. This is an even more powerful hurricane as far as the low pressure with the millibars and the wind speeds. And I'm just imagining the structures in the western part of Jamaica aren't built up to even the standard of home back in 1992 here in South Florida. The building codes obviously have changed here to increase, but it's just heartbreaking to think about what some of these people are going to be dealing with in if not now, in just a few moments.
Yeah, in a few moments, in a few hours. It's not going to be fast moving across the island, right? We've been tracking it for hours and it's slowly approaching. And so now you take the worst of the worst and put it on top of these homes that can't withstand even just a Category 3 or Category 4 impact. And this is going to move across the island for hours before it exits and moves into the open water. So again, wording is total loss, structure failure, isolating communities, loss of power, loss of communication at this point as this continues to get closer and closer and conditions deteriorate even more. I can only imagine what these coastal communities are experiencing right now as that eye wall is moving onshore.
We just have to hope that the majority of people evacuated and heeded those evacuation orders and got out. Chelsea, great job. John, Adam, great job. We're going to let you go and regroup with the rest of the weather team. And obviously our coverage is going to continue. We don't have images coming out of the western part of Jamaica that's about to be just inundated with just devastating, catastrophic type weather event. But what we are showing you is about 100 miles to the east. This is Kingston. This is the capital. 900,000 or so people live in Kingston proper within the city limits. It's a major city. It's the biggest city in Jamaica, and this is Kingston Bay. And you can see the chop and the water and the just the water swells beginning to increase. They're expecting to see storm surge there. They're going to be dealing with tropical storm force winds, but are going to be spared the brunt. What they're not being spared from, though, is the flash flooding. And we've been looking at this. This is Kingston as well. And you see the flash flooding here. Government workers have been working around the clock trying to clear the gullies, the systems that they use to funnel the water out from within the city limits out into the ocean. But those gullies have been clogged with vegetation, with debris, with trash. So they've been bringing in heavy machinery to try to clean out those gullies the best they can. But when you've had so much rainfall leading up to a catastrophic hurricane event, the ground is saturated already. So we are going to see flash flooding and intense flooding even into Kingston, where they're not going to see the brunt of this storm. You do see, for the most part, people are heeding the warnings. They're staying off the streets. There's an individual car there, but the cameras all morning long, they look like ghost towns because nobody is out in the roads. Nobody's out in the streets. They've barricaded their homes and their businesses to do the best they can to try to stay safe. Kingston, again, going to avoid the brunt of this storm. But when we go back to western Jamaica, to Mandeville, to St. Elizabeth Parish, wow, just thinking about it, it's devastating. We're going to go back to John Morales now. And John, you can talk over some of these videos, but the big story is what's behind you right now. And earlier when you were on the air, we got the update, and I know Adam informed you of the drop in pressure, the lower millibars, and up to 180 miles per hour. You stopped. It stopped you in your tracks, and I know you had to pause there and recompose yourself, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime type storm that they've never seen before in Jamaica or virtually anywhere across the Caribbean.
Yeah, certainly for Jamaica, it's nothing like this has ever happened, right? And it's already happening, because the eye wall is now just less than 10 miles, it's about 7 miles from the coast. The eye wall arriving at the coastline, the eye wall being defined as this ring that surrounds the eye of the hurricane, which is devoid of clouds. Just an incredible satellite image, obviously enhanced, right? Because we're showing you the coldest cloud tops here in purple. These are the towering thunderstorms that surround the eye of the hurricane, all spinning around this center. Just a magnificent physical specimen in terms of physics and what it's producing here, the thermodynamics, the wonders of the dynamism of the atmosphere. But at the same time, just knowing what they're going to go through in Jamaica is just horrific. So listen, I don't want to bury the lead here. You spoke about my reaction when here live during our stream, we had Annenberg come up, update me that the pressure had dropped to 896 millibars. Well, it dropped again. It's down to 892 millibars now. As of the 10 a.m. update, there are Hurricane Hunter aircraft flying through the eye of this hurricane. They're dropping those dropsondes, which are these instruments that come out of the belly of the aircraft and measure weather elements, including the pressure, as they drop down towards the surface of the ocean.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Are we approaching Wilma status?
Yeah, Wilma was 882.
Okay.
I said earlier, I don't think there's time for it to make it to Wilma. I'm going to show you that ranking in just a second.
This is already one of the most powerful hurricanes, not only to hit Jamaica, but that we've seen.
It is, yes, indeed. It's now a top 5 ever Atlantic hurricane. So it's in top 5 for the Atlantic, top 3 in terms of October, November, and the strongest ever so late in a season. Those are some of the statistics. Let me show you the 10 a.m. update here. The maximum sustained winds are now up to 185 miles per hour. That is sustained, in other words, averaged over the course of 2 minutes. It has to average 185. There will be some valleys. There will also be peaks well above that. Now, generally, those peaks are 30% higher, a factor of 1.3. And that alone is enough to bring it to around 210 miles per hour. But the problem is that due to the topographic relief of Jamaica, as the air gets squeezed going up mountains and hilltops, you're going to get a 1.5 factor. So that's, 1.5 times 185. And that gets us what? 265 miles per hour in some of those hilltops. This is just an incredible hurricane. There's the pressure, 892 millibars, and making a beeline for the southwest coast of Jamaica, specifically St. Elizabeth Parish, where the distance from the center of the eye to the coast is now down to 16 miles. 16 miles. So, within the next hour or so, we will get that landfall. Chris, this is what we were talking about. I've been able to update this. So we are now tied with the great Labor Day hurricane of 1935, which struck the Florida Keys and, of course, destroyed the Flagler-built railroad that went down there. There were hundreds of deaths in the Florida Keys by pressure at landfall. The Labor Day hurricane holds the record because Wilma's pressure of 882 was not measured at landfall. It was measured when it was off the coast of Cozumel in the Yucatan Channel in Mexico. And by the way, Gilbert made a run below 900 millibars as well, but it was after it had left Jamaica that we saw that level of intensity of Gilbert becoming a Category 5 hurricane, and it is the second ranked strongest hurricane in the Atlantic, and now we have a tie between the Great Labor Day hurricane of 1935 and 2025's Hurricane Melissa at 892 millibars. Rita completes the list at number 5 with a pressure of 895 millibars. So I want to show this graphic because I think it's very illustrative of what's going on right now as the eye of the hurricane makes its way onshore. Keep in mind, hurricane force winds only extend out 25 miles from the coast. 25 miles from the center. I told you just a second ago that the center was only about 16 miles offshore. What does that mean, therefore? It means that the hurricane force winds are already onshore. More than likely, out of all the parishes that I can think of where that's being felt, I think it's being felt in St. Elizabeth Parish right now. And you can see that these hurricane force winds are not going to reach Kingston. So you know, as you look at our live images, and they're mainly from Kingston today, the cameras that we're using to try to convey what's going on down in Jamaica today, I want you to realize that they're probably not going to get anything beyond tropical storm force winds in Kingston and the surrounding metropolis there. It's not going to be nearly as bad as it is in the western portion of Jamaica as this system moves through. Very briefly, I'll tell you that once it leaves Jamaica, these conditions will approach Cuba, cross Cuba, and eventually head towards the Bahamas. So Cuba, the main impacts are tonight. Bahamas, the main impacts are tomorrow. All right, so let's put this into numbers. And I chose Mandeville, which is in Manchester Parish, because Mandeville has a pretty good-sized population of about 45,000 people. Kingston, by the way, is north of 900,000 people. It's a very huge metropolis, and that's just Kingston proper. There are the surrounding metro area is north of 1 million people. But Mandeville has 45,000 people. And look at the difference in the sustained winds and the potential wind gusts at both of these locations. Mandeville, again, Manchester Parish, further west of Kingston, much closer to the eye of the hurricane, and the wind gusts there coming up in the next 2 hours are going to be 160 to 170 miles per hour, whereas in Kingston, you know, you'll be lucky, or unlucky in this case, to get a gust that will reach hurricane force. So, I mean, you know, 170 versus 75 in Kingston. It makes a huge difference where you are in terms of the wind speeds that you will encounter. Now, I don't have it on this graph because I wanted to choose relatively big cities, but the parish seat for St. Elizabeth is Black River. And Black River is going to be even closer, you know, well within the eye wall, well within the worst of this hurricane. And for Black River, Jamaica, the expected sustained wind is 170 to 180. So just replace this and insert 170 to 180 miles per hour sustained. And the gusts are expected to be 200 to 220 miles per hour. In Black River. Now listen, I'm focusing a lot on winds, but you got to realize that this is a rainstorm too, right? And it's already been raining for a couple of days down there. Inches upon inches, or millimeters upon millimeters of rain, if you prefer what the rest of the world prefers, which is the metric system. Raining upon Jamaica, already producing floods. We've seen those images here on the stream that we've shared with you this morning on NBC6. So the flooding is already ongoing. Landslides are probably starting to develop as the rain becomes heavier. The softened ground starts to give way, and you get these mudslides and landslides going on. Communities are getting cut off because bridges are getting washed away, or because bridges are covered and damaged to such a point that you can't get across them. Obviously, the power is going out in Jamaica at this hour, and will continue to do so across much of the rest of the country. You know, this is a Maria level type of impact, except it's worse because Maria was a Category 4 and this is a Cat 5, and not just a borderline Cat 5 with sustained winds of 160. It is a Cat 5 with sustained winds of 185 miles per hour, again, one of the strongest hurricanes ever recorded. That's what Melissa is. That is what's hitting Jamaica right now. And again, landfall happening right about now, crossing the country until about 2:15-ish, 2:30 this afternoon, still with impacts and rain bands impacting Jamaica. Then we focus on Cuba. Folks, I know I haven't talked much about Cuba, but you have to realize what is imminent right now, what is going on as this hurricane makes its final approach to Jamaica as one of the strongest hurricanes in history. All right. For Cuba, though, the impacts are going to be quite significant too, because it may not be a Cat 5, but as Chelsea Ambries said a little while ago, it could be a Category 4 as it makes its approach to eastern Cuba to impact large cities like Santiago de Cuba which is quite a large city there in the eastern part of this country. We know what the situation with the infrastructure is in Cuba, which is not good, and therefore you would expect some of these impacts from a major hurricane to be long-lasting for Cuba. That would be tonight, exiting tomorrow morning. There you see the time, 6:45 in the morning, and then you folks in the Bahamas, again, you watch us quite a bit. I know we haven't spoken to you much, but you're about to get a hurricane too, and this is going to be tomorrow, Wednesday. Here's the mid-afternoon picture for you, showing you some of those southeasternmost Bahamas with a hurricane crossing right through your area during the mid to late afternoon tomorrow before it heads out further towards the northeast, shoved away from the U.S. coast by a front which is headed our way. By the way, Bermuda may have to tangle with this down the road. So, Chris, just summarizing the headline of the hour, the barometric pressure in the center of Hurricane Melissa is down to 892 millibars. It makes it the fifth ranked strongest hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic. Did I say fifth? I think we're up to 3, right? Up to third. Yeah, up to third. I'm still thinking of the 896. 892 is the third strongest hurricane in the history of the Atlantic, tied with the Great Labor Day Hurricane of 1935, which struck the Florida Keys. It is just a historic hurricane, and Jamaica has never seen anything like this.
Look at the date, John, October 28th. It's not just the third strongest ever. It's so late in the hurricane season to see this type of storm. This is when we're starting to forget about hurricane season and move on and think about the holidays ahead and focus on the fall season. Not this year. And unfortunately not this year, because we're seeing just a late season surge.
We are. So, last year was like that too, a backloaded hurricane season.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're seeing as the climate changes, and a lot of this is man-made, right? As the climate changes and the sea surface temperatures continue to be warm much later into the year when you would otherwise expected them to be, well, you get these strong hurricanes, not just out of place in terms of time, but sometimes out of place in terms of geography too, because we're seeing these hurricanes in the far North Atlantic. We're seeing hurricanes threaten to reach Europe as a tropical system still. These are things that never used to happen. They're happening now, and they have a lot to do with the changes we're seeing in the climate.
We know the storm's going to come in, looks like St. Elizabeth Parish. You mentioned Black River. You look to the north of Black River, though, and it's a very popular place for people who have maybe traveled to visit Jamaica, Montego Bay. It's just to the north of Black River, on the north coast of Jamaica. Obviously, it's not going to have the initial eye, but a big part of this storm is going to pass over that area. Yeah. What type of impact do you foresee for the northern part of the country? Obviously, it's going to give time for the land to dissipate some of the wind speeds, hopefully help out in that aspect. But they're still going to see a huge portion of this storm in places like Montego Bay and Falmouth and maybe even stretching over into St. Anne's Bay and into Ocho Rios.
Indeed. I mean, first of all, it's crossing Jamaica right on the short end.
Yeah.
It's not going east to west, it's going south to north. So it's only going to spend probably about 4 hours over the country. I'm talking about the center of the eye of the hurricane, which is enough time to knock it down. Yeah, for sure. It's not going to exit Jamaica as an 185 mile per hour sustained wind hurricane. It's likely going to be lower than that. But I'm starting to wonder if it'll even get below Category 5. So Category 5 starts at 157 miles per hour. Can we knock off 28 miles per hour to the wind speed here in the 4 hours that it crosses Jamaica? Not sure, because that's how strong it is right now, right? Again, some of those communities will experience, depending on how close they are to the eye wall and the core of this hurricane, they're going to experience the same type of conditions I described for Black River, which is, again, sustained winds 170 to 180, gusts well above 200 miles per hour.
It's incredible to think about on how a hurricane can pass over an entire country, and granted it's 4 hours, and maintain potentially a Category 5 status and then get back into the Caribbean, into the Atlantic, and re-intensify potentially before it moves into parts of Cuba.
Yeah, I mean, like Chelsea Ambrose was saying, with a lack of wind shear,
can't rip it apart.
If there's nothing aloft to cut the head off of the hurricane, then it's just going to continue to be just as strong. I think that process is expected to occur once it crosses eastern Cuba. The influence of the upper level trough will be felt a little bit further, and that wind shear should kick in.
John, thank you. Remarkable job as always, and we want to give you a live look in Jamaica right now. And while we still have you, I know this is one of the big concerns is while you may not get hit directly by the wind, the rain and the flooding. I know flooding can cause significant loss of life. Actually, John's going to go back and rejoin the weather team. They're working hard behind the scenes to get the updated information for us because, again, when you have a situation like this with a potentially catastrophic event, not potentially, this is going to be a catastrophic hurricane, one of the most powerful hurricanes ever recorded, top 3 now. And it's so late in the season. This is the most powerful hurricane that we've ever seen this late in the season, and now top 3 ever recorded. So this is a significant event that's going to impact the western part of Jamaica. St. Elizabeth, it looks like, is where it's going to make its landfall, which should happen momentarily. The video you're looking at is Kingston. This is about 100 miles to the east, and they're still dealing with hurricane type events. The flash flooding there, the saturated ground, the rain just for days leading up to Hurricane Melissa saturated the ground. So now the water, this new rainfall, has nowhere to go. So it's going to cause flooding. It's going to cause flash flooding. It's going to cause landslides and mudslides, as John was talking about. This is Kingston Bay, where the chop is on. It's continuing to increase. You're seeing significant whitecaps there in Kingston Bay, where they could see a storm surge as well. Chelsea Ambrose broke it down for us earlier on how the storm surge is primarily to the east of the eye of the storm, which Kingston is. It is 100 miles to the east of the eye of the storm, so that should help prevent it from seeing the 12 to 13 foot storm surge that some of the other parishes, maybe Clarendon area in Maypen and St. Catherine, they could see more significant storm surge there. They're a little closer to the eye. In Manchester as well, Manchester Parish, where Mandeville is, they're going to see that storm surge that could be up to 12, 13, 14 feet. Imagine that. Stand up for a moment. How tall are you? Average person 5 to 6 feet, maybe, double that. And that's the amount of water, salt water, that can surge into the shore from the ocean, brought on by this insanely symmetrical storm. It looks like a buzzsaw right here. You see the well-defined eye as it continues to inch its way toward the St. Elizabeth Parish area of Jamaica, where it's going to be absolutely catastrophic. Just reports coming in of total devastation potential from this storm, and can change the whole landscape, change that area of Jamaica and make it unrecognizable. The type of storm that doesn't take weeks or months, it takes decades to recover from this type of damage that we're going to see. Do we have some more live images out of Jamaica? Okay, we're losing our images. In fact, as the winds begin to pick up and the rain intensifies, obviously technology is challenged. So we've lost our cameras down there in Kingston even, and Kingston's 100 miles or so away from the eye of this storm, but they're still going to see tropical storm force winds. Nothing like what's happening out west, where again 185 mile per hour sustained winds. Think about this past weekend. In parts of Broward County, we saw 30 mile an hour wind gusts, and people were like, hey, wow, this is so windy. It's super windy outside. That's 30 mile an hour wind gusts. We're talking wind gusts in excess of 250 to 260 miles per hour. You could do the math on that. We want to bring in First Alert meteorologist Adam with more on that. And you talk these wind speeds, it almost sounds unthinkable, but this is a reality of what we're dealing with right now and what folks in St. Elizabeth and Black River and Westmoreland and the western parts of Jamaica could see in just moments.
Yeah, the last thing you want, well, first of all, you never want any sort of hurricane to hit you, let alone a major hurricane, let alone a Category 5 that's actually continuing to strengthen. It's actually strengthening as it's making landfall. So it's accelerating in the wrong direction intensity-wise as we're making a landfall. You never want to see that. And it's already extremely strong. Here's some new stats and kind of ways to wrap your head around it. Sustained winds now up to 185 miles per hour, putting it firmly towards the top of the list here as far as strongest hurricanes. You can measure it a couple different ways with pressure or actual wind speed, right? So we're talking 185. This is the third category. This is what's interesting, right? Because it didn't seem like a very busy season, but sometimes looks can be deceiving. This is the third Category 5 of the 2025 season. There's only one other hurricane season on record where we had more than 3 Category 5s, and that was 2005, where we had 4 Category 5 hurricanes. So this is now slowly but surely working its way into the record books as far as a busy and impactful hurricane season. So that's when you just look at the wind speeds, pressure down to 892, and we're going to probably have another reconnaissance update here closer to the top of the hour. For now, this is as of the 10 a.m. update, pressure down to 892. This is getting eerily close to about as low as we can go. Tied for third lowest pressure, Wilma, 882 back in 2005 here. So pressure way down. So what's next here? Well, Jamaica landfall shortly. In fact, looks like that eye wall is maybe now in the process of making landfall. Cuba landfall over tonight if the forecast holds. Then it looks like direct impact. We could be looking at some landfall here in the Bahamas / Turks and Caicos region here as we go into Wednesday. So this is probably going to be a little off now because it continues to move here, but I'm trying to measure some of the distances. So yeah, this is now probably only about 5 miles or so, that eye wall for making landfall, maybe less than 5 miles. Probably less than 5 now. And I had this lined up with the center of the hurricane. That's when it's officially landfall. When the eye wall is hitting the coast, it's in the process of making landfall. When that center of the eye touches land, that's when it has officially made landfall. So this is a little off right now because it is moving forward a little bit faster now. So we're probably sitting at about 10 miles away from that center making landfall here. So probably in less than an hour, it's going to do just that. This graphic talks about how the mountains do not help for a myriad of reasons. From the rain standpoint, mudslide, landslide potential. From the wind standpoint here, when you've got mountains ranging anywhere from 2,000 to 7,000 feet, with the bigger mountains on the eastern side, places like Blue Mountain and the likes here, when you have big mountains there and you have strong winds coming in, these winds smash against the mountains, can't go through the mountains, are forced up and over. As that wind is smashing into the mountain, that wind compresses, okay? That area of contact from the wind hitting the mountains compresses. When you compress something, it accelerates, okay? So you get winds that are even stronger than this 185 mile per hour hurricane would normally produce. Up to 50% stronger. So you just do the math on that, 185 times 1.5, and you're getting way above to consistently above 250 miles per hour, possible in some spots. Now look, this is not the whole island. It's going to be near landfall, which is right in through here, Treasure Beach area.